we're gonna model, texture, animate, and render this beautiful supplement product in Blender from scratch. And whether you're a 3D artist trying to visualize products for others so you can get paid, or whether you're building your own brand, in this video you're gonna learn about the entire product animation process step by step. And guys, I'll try to explain as much as I can in this 30-minute video, but if you need some more guidance for creating more advanced product visuals, like for example this Oral-B commercial that I made, then check out my courses down in the description. Now we're gonna stop wasting time and let's start the video. Alright, so step number one is going to be using AI to generate a reference image and some textures which we're going to use in our scene. Now, a common mistake that beginners make is they try to come up with their own scenes out of their own head. But if you're not a very experienced artist, this will almost certainly turn out to be shitty most of the time. Some people got creative minds and they're talented when it comes to this stuff, but most of the time this is not the case. So if you're new to this, just use AI. Don't try to create your own original work because it's going to be a lot harder. And even if you do use AI, it is an original work. Nobody else probably created this shit before, so it is going to be something unique. So for this purpose, you can use any image generator that you can come up with. Today in this video, I'm going to be using canva.com because Canva is totally free. Everybody can use it. You just have to make an account, and that's it. If you got access to a better one, then you can go ahead and do that. I like Canva because it's super fast and it's super easy. All you do is you go to canva.com, you make an account, you click on Canva AI down here, and then over here underneath the text box, you click on image. That's going to allow you to generate images from prompts. So you can see my prompt history down here. The very first thing I did was vitamin supplement label. I put that in there, and as you can see, it gave me a combination of labels along with some scenes which don't look very nice. For example, this one here doesn't really make any sense. We have a bottle on a label. So I scratched that one. I typed in fruity vitamin supplement label, and then it gave me 3 labels and this beautiful scene right here. Now the labels are great. I like this one right here, so this is what I'm going to wrap around my bottle. And by the way, this is just a placeholder. As you can see, the text here doesn't really make any sense. We're just using this so it can give us an idea for how we can design the label to make it look nice and cute. Obviously, if you're going to do this for real for a company, then you have to change up some things over here, and I'm going to show you how you can do that as well. But if you're just doing this for a portfolio, then it really doesn't matter. So we're going to download this image to our computer, and then just to get a few more ideas for our scene, I'm going to once again type in fruity vitamin supplement. I'm not going to type in label because I just want to see the supplement. And of course down here you can change the style if you want to, you can change the format, you can change whatever. And as you can see, we got a whole bunch of other gorgeous scenes which we can also try to recreate. These are a little bit more complicated, but if you just spend a couple minutes fooling around with the prompts, you're going to get a whole bunch of really cool ideas. I typed in fruity vitamin tablet bottle, and it gave me these shots right here which look very realistic, and also they give us some good ideas for what we can try to create in Blender if we want to make some complex animations from it. So just gather a couple of these images. I'm going to go with this one right here. This is going to be the scene that I'm going to create because I think it looks very nice. And then for the label on this bottle, I'm going to try out a couple of these images. Maybe I even generate a few more afterwards, but I think this should be good for now. Okay, so step number 2, now that we decided what we're going to create, we have our AI content generated. Now we have to gather some more resources for creating this scene right here. Now a little cheat code that 3D artists tend to not like very much, and I think that's just pure fucking arrogance, is that you can download models from the internet so you don't have to model them yourself. So we're gonna have to download some strawberries, some blueberries, some oranges and shit like that, which we can scatter around this scene. We don't want to have to make this from scratch because that's gonna take 10 hours to do, and there's already a million people who modeled this and they were kind enough to allow us to download this for free. So to get these little props, all we have to do is go to this website called sketchfab.com. You also have to make an account here if you want to download stuff for free, and in this case we're just gonna need some fruits. So we're gonna go to the search box up here and let's type in strawberry, and then we just have a look around to see what we can find. Pick a strawberry that looks nice. I like this one right here. I think this looks pretty good. So shout out to gelme.com.br for giving us this object right here. And to download this, you click on download 3D model and download the GLB down here at the bottom. Then you're gonna type in blueberry, have a look around to see what looks best. I liked this one right here by INSEE Procol or whatever. I'm gonna put all the download links for the fruits that I'm using in the description. So once again, download JLB, download right here. Then we also need an orange. I'm gonna go with this one down here by Ziara Almond 3D. And I also want a slice of kiwi, so we got a Chilean kiwi right here. This was uploaded by MJK, and you can download it for free as well. There are also paid assets, so if you're willing to spend some money, you can probably get some higher quality assets as well, but these are good enough. So again, you're gonna find the links in the description for these fruits. You can get some more if you want to get some peppermint leaves or something like that. You can look for those as well. And once we downloaded all our fruits, now it's up to you you whether you want to download a supplement bottle from Sketchfab or you want to make one yourself. Now, just to keep everything super beginner friendly and also to save time, we're not going to model our own bottle from scratch. If you guys want a tutorial for how to model your own supplement bottle, I can make that in another video. Just let me know down in the comments. But if you're a beginner, that would take you at least half an hour to do when you can just download it in 2 clicks. So you just pick one that you like. For example, I like this one right here. The colors aren't right, but the colors are very easy to change. So we're going to download this one here by Art by Tahir. Okay, so now that we downloaded everything, before we start assembling our scene in Blender, I recommend you make a new folder somewhere on your computer where you're gonna put together all the resources for this project just to keep shit organized. So I got a new folder, my Blender projects folder called Fruity Supplement. I'm gonna paste everything in here, and there's my 3D files, there's my image right here. If I have to get anything else, I'll just put it right here. Okay, so now let's jump into Blender and let's start assembling our scene. The first thing we're going to do is open up a new Blender file, select everything, delete it, you don't need none of the default stuff, and then go up to the top left corner, click on File, go to Import, click on JLB, that's the format that we downloaded from Sketchfab, and then find your Fruity Supplement folder. This is where we got all the downloaded items. I'm just going to import my bottle so I can set that up first. Now, when you import models from Sketchfab, you have to expect some issues with the model. You're going to have to probably put in a little bit of work to make it work properly. So for example, in this case, you're going to notice that first of all, the object is separated into a bunch of different objects where it shouldn't be. I don't know why this happens. It's something to do with the file conversions between programs probably. But for example, we have 2 objects making up the lid, which is not supposed to be the case. And it's not even just 2, we have a whole bunch of different objects up here. For example, this little piece is separate for some reason. So we just have to make sure to select everything up on the cap and not select anything else. And then we just use Control J to join all those together into one object. And if you have something similar going on for the body, you're gonna have to do the same for the body. You don't have to do this, but it's just gonna make it more manageable so you don't have to select a bunch of different items every time you want to move this around somewhere. Then the next thing is that a lot of times when you import a model from Sketchfab, you're gonna have a lot of double geometry. So again, for some reason, these vertices over here are not joined together, so we have this separation. And to fix that, you select both of these objects, you go to edit mode on both of them, you select all the geometry with A, and you just press M and you merge your vertices by distance. That's gonna take all the vertices that are in the same place, it's going to merge them into one, so it's going to be a little bit cleaner. And another things you might want to fix, maybe not all the time, but most of the time in situations like this one right here, we don't need to have these little triangles where we're supposed to have a square surface. As you can see, these diagonal lines here are completely unnecessary, so if we get rid of them, it's going to be better. And of course, we're not going to go around the entire model and dissolve every single diagonal edge. That would take 30 fucking years. Instead, we're going to select all the geometry, we're going to press Alt J, and then most of the time Blender is going to automatically dissolve all the diagonals and turn everything into nice little quads. The bottom here is still pretty messy, but you're not going to see that in our render anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And in the top here, we also have to use Alt J. That's going to get rid of all the unnecessary geometry. So just to give you a better idea of how much better the model is, if you look at my statistics up here, originally the number of edges was 899,000, and then after we do these little operations, now it's going to be a little bit less than 600,000. So that's a pretty big difference. It still could be a lot better. This model has way too many polygons in the wrong places, so it's got a million polygons on each of these tiny little bars right here, but it doesn't really have enough polygons over here because you can still see the edges here. So I might do a little bit more work on that. I'll dissolve some of this geometry. I'll take this edge loop and I'll slide it outwards, and then once it's above this one down here, I'll bridge those 2 edge loops and I'll bevel this again to make it a little bit more detailed like this. And there we go. Now the geometry of this bottle is ready. I'm still gonna just slightly adjust the materials. For example, the cap is not supposed to be black, it's supposed to be white. The body in my situation is also supposed to be white, so I'll make that completely white. And then there's this other material down here for the label. If you want to keep shit a little bit more organized, you probably want to rename these materials. So for example, I'll name this one label, this one here is going to be called body, and then this one up here at the top is going to be called cap or lid or whatever. Now the next step is to replace the texture on this bottle. So to do that, we're going to select the edge loop at the top and the edge loop around the bottom. Then in the back of the bottle, you're going to select a vertical edge like this, press Ctrl E, mark seam, and that's going to allow you to select this surface right here and UV unwrap it. So you just press U, unwrap, angle based. In the shading tab, now you can control this material. You just have to make sure that this thing down here is set to UV editor so that when you select your geometry here, you can edit your UVs here. And now once you select the label material, you can get rid of this shit down here. We don't need any of that. And this here we're going to replace with a label that we got from Canva, or if you're working for an existing brand, you're going to use their label. So I'm just going to get rid of this image right here. I'm going to open up another one, and in my Fruity Supplement folder, here's my image texture. All I got to do now is in face select mode we'll press L to select the label surface. And now down here, if I use my 2D cursor as a pivot point, I can rotate this around the corner. So as you can see, we got to rotate this by 90 degrees so it's facing the right way. And then we also have to scale it by -1 on the y-axis to invert it, and also scale it up a little bit. Now it's still inverted, so we have to actually scale it to -1 on the x-axis. And then if you just play around with the stretching a little bit, you're eventually going to get it right. If you can't fit the label onto the bottle, then what you do is you change the size of the bottle. So for example, maybe you have to make your bottle a little bit taller so the texture fits better or whatever. But it works all right for me, so I'm just going to leave it like this for now. By the way, also I want to parent the cap to the bottle with Control P, and there we go. Now the bottle's ready. Now let's construct our scene. So first, cursor to world origin, and then with Shift A we're going to add a plane, and on this plane we're going to create the fruity environment. So go to top view with 7, and then Control Alt 0 to align the camera with your view. You don't have a camera because we deleted it, but Shift A camera down here, Control Alt 0, and now there you go. There's your camera above your scene. We're going to flip this bottle by rotating it on the x-axis by -90 degrees, also a little bit around the y-axis so it's facing us like this. And before we start adding our fruits into our scene, let's also decide on the aspect ratio. So now it's up to you whether you need to have a square frame or you want to have a wide frame for like a banner or a website background or something. Maybe you want to have a fucking desktop background or a billboard for the highway. Maybe you want to have an Instagram vertical format, in which case you select the camera, you go to output properties, and you set the resolution to 1080 by 1920. And this is going to be your standard social media, Instagram, TikTok, whatever the fuck frame. But in this case, I'm going to do 1920 by 1920 because that gives me a nice big square frame. And down here in my camera settings, I'm going to set my focal length to 80 or 90. And that's just going to zoom in a little bit so my thing is going to be a little bit nicer. There's going to be less perspective distortion. Okay, so now make sure you save your scene with Control S, and then we're going to start importing our fruit. So once again, File, Import, click on GLB, and first let's throw in our strawberries. So here's a strawberry in our scene now. And by the way, you probably want to clean this up a little bit too because it's all fucked up at the beginning. As you can see, we got an origin point over there, and over here I don't want any of that. So first of all, just join everything together. We might have to detriangulate with Alt J, and I don't know what's with these other origin points. I guess we can just delete those, or you don't have to. They're not really bothering us. And then click on the surface and Shift S selection to cursor. That's going to snap the strawberry onto the 3D cursor, and you want to flip your strawberry sideways, scale it down a little bit, and from camera view just place it wherever you want to place it. Now in the outliner here, let's open up our image editor so we can open up our reference image. So now we can just look at it so we can see where we're supposed to place our fruits and also how big they're supposed to be compared to the bottle. So one strawberry here, another strawberry here. You might want to rotate each of them around the local y-axis with G and double Z, just so they're not all exactly the same. You might want to change their scale a little bit. Then we want to have a tiny little strawberry. You want to have a big one up here. If you got these annoying lines over here, you go up to viewport overlays and you uncheck your relationship lines. Once we got a couple of strawberries, we're going to go and import our blueberries next. Then when we bring in our kiwi, for some reason the origin point of the kiwi is down here. So if I snap that somewhere, the point snaps to my 3D cursor, not the kiwi. So what I do is I just go to Object, Set Origin, Origin to Geometry. That places the origin in the middle of the kiwi, so now I can snap it anywhere I want and it's going to listen. Now I decided to change my aspect ratio to make my view a little bit wider. I just think it looks a little bit nicer. Let's quickly make a couple of droplets which we can scatter around our scene. So we're going to lower ourselves down onto the surface. And don't worry, I know my lighting got different now, but I'll tell you about that in a couple of seconds. So to make the little droplets, we're going to go Shift A Mesh Cube. You're going to subdivide this cube with Control 4. Then in the modifiers tab, you're going to apply that modifier. Then add a new cast modifier from the deform section. Factor to 1, apply that. That turns it into a sphere. Now you can squeeze that down on the z-axis. From side view, you can go ahead and delete the lower half of this droplet, and then take this edge segment at the bottom. You're going to extrude that and scale it inwards, and this edge on the outside you're going to bevel with Control B. Scroll up a couple of times to make that nice and round, and also fill in the bottom with F. Then you go to Object, Shade Smooth. Then you go down here to add a new material. You change the surface from principled to glass, and you lower that down. You want to place it just slightly above the surface. Just make sure it doesn't clip through the surface. And once you got one of those, you want to scatter that all over your surface. So you want to duplicate it with Shift D, scale it down, scale it up, scale it all over the place. Just toss it around, populate the entire scene with a bunch of these little droplets. Just for reference, you can pause my scene right now so you can see where I placed mine. They're all selected right now. Also make sure that your roughness on your glass is set to 0. You want your glass to be nice and clear. Now let's quickly talk about the environment. Here's what my environment looks like. I have this big spherical light in the background. In your shader editor where you're editing the nodes for your materials, you're going to go up here, you're going to switch from Object object to world, now you're going to be editing the world material, so the material for the environment. And by default, yours is going to look like this. You're going to have this shitty gray environment. By the way, I'm in Cycles rendered view in case it's not obvious. So what you do is you first go Shift A, add a gradient texture node, run that through a color ramp node where these markers are placed like in my scene. You can copy the number position of the black one if you want to. Plug that up real quick into the color, set the background strength to 6.5, and then of course we want to rotate this so it's over on that side. We're going to need our node wrangler for that. If you don't have your node wrangler, you go to edit preferences, go to add-ons, search for a node wrangler up here, check that real quick, and then you select your gradient texture node, you press Ctrl T. That's going to connect these two nodes to it. In those two nodes, you want to make sure you get the same numbers as I got right here, and there you go. Now you're going to get this pretty little environment which you can now render as a scene. By the way, here's a little bonus tip. If we select a label for our bottle and we go back to object here, you can make the colors here a little bit more vibrant by moving this image texture node to the side, Shift A, hue saturation value node, and turn up the saturation as high as you like. You probably don't want to go too high. And also keep in mind that you're going to have to do some post-processing to make the colors a little bit nicer. But just so you know, you can adjust some of the values here if you want to adjust the colors. You can also shift the hue if you want to. You probably don't want to, but you might want to. And also another thing I will mention to you is you have to play with the position of these fruits on the Z-axis to adjust your shadows. So notice how my bottle is clipping through the surface a little bit like this, as are my strawberries, as are some of the other things. That just gives me the right kind of shadows that I want to have here. So in your render settings, you want to set the samples to at least 128. Maybe you want to go a little bit higher than that. Also make sure to check your denoise down here so you don't have a bunch of grain in your scene, and then just go up to render image. That's how you render a single image. Now it's time to make an animation. Now here's a couple of preliminary steps we have to take before we start making the animation. First, you're going to select all your fruits in your scene and all the droplets and everything. After you select all of those, you're going to select the plane underneath them, and you're going to parent all the fruits to the plane. That way, if we want to move all of this stuff away, we just have to select the plane and it's going to move very easily. Then we're also going to change the environment texture strength from whatever it was before, 8.5 to 14. I might change this back later, but for now we're going to go like this. And then let's make our very first few keyframes. So I'm going to do this pretty quickly, guys. Just try to copy what I'm doing, and if you're not familiar with the steps that I'm taking here, then just write down some of the terms I'm using and go look them up so you can learn a little bit more about them. Or if you need some more explanations, that's why I got my courses in the description, so you can check those out as well. Now down here in our timeline, we're going to place the marker to frame 20. On frame 20, we're going to select the camera and find focal length in the camera settings. You're going to keyframe that, and then you're going to move to frame -20 when you're going to zoom the hell in. There's a fucking dog barking outside and there's children screaming. I don't know what's going on. Forgive me, guys. I hope it's not too bad. We're going to zoom this in until, let's say, 300, 320 or something like that, maybe even 360. So this is the focal length before the start of the animation. So at the start of the animation, this is where we are. Now there's another fucking dog barking. Two dogs barking at each other. Hold on, let me go shoot him. So we want the camera to start very close up, and then we want it to zoom out. Now I want the camera to spend a little bit more time down here. So I'll place another focal length keyframe on frame 3, and I'll just push that backwards a little bit, as well as this other keyframe down here. And maybe I'll also overwrite this middle keyframe with a slightly higher focal length, just so it stays a little bit closer for a little bit longer. So the first keyframe is focal length 310, the second one is 198, and the third one is over here, that's 90 millimeters. And I'm probably going to change this afterwards, so I'm probably going to play around with this a little bit more off camera. But then once we zoom out, I want the camera to continue zooming out for another couple of frames. So on frame 160, I'm going to decrease the focal length a little bit more. So maybe I'll change that to something like 175, so it just continues to slowly zoom out for a little bit longer. Now let's go to rendered view so we can talk about the bottle. In the beginning, I want the bottle to be flipped, so on frame 0, I'm going to turn it around by maybe a little bit more than 180 degrees. We want to get close to a full circle, so something like this, I keyframe location rotation, and we're going to throw this frame backwards to -20, and then on frame 20, we're going to rotate it in the opposite direction. So once again, we're going to bring it up to around here, not quite into view, so it's facing us. Again, keyframe location rotation, and then in the beginning, it's going to do this little spin, and I want it to continue spinning a little bit more. So only on something like frame 60, I want it to be facing us like this. So I'll add another location rotation keyframe there. Again, you probably want to adjust the positions of these keyframes just so you can get a smoother movement. So mine looks something like this right now. And then in rendered view, I also want to have a light which is going to be behind this bottle. So shift a light area. We're going to rotate that around the x-axis by 180 degrees so it's facing us. Scale that up a little bit and just place it underneath the bottle as close as you can to the floor, but slightly above the floor. And that way it's going to light up the edges of this bottle. So here you go. Now we have these lit edges. I'm going to leave that white because I think that looks pretty nice. And also notice how that's lighting up the strawberries and the fruits in the environment. So that's a pretty important detail. Now in the beginning, I want my environments to be dark. So I'm going to select my background world node, right click on strength, insert keyframe, place that keyframe onto maybe frame 60 where we want to gain full lighting. So maybe let's do frame 78 or 80. And then on frame 20, we're going to set the background strength to 1 or maybe even less than that, maybe 0.7 or something. Right click, insert keyframe again. And now between frame 20 and 80, we're going to be gaining environmental light. Up until that point, it's going to be dark. So there's the first part of our animation. Here's what it looks like in material view, just so you can see very simply what it looks like. And at this point, I want my fruits to disappear. So I want the fruits to shrink down and I want them to fade away behind the bottle. So I'm going to use my 3D cursor as my pivot point. I'll place that 3D cursor onto the underside of the bottle down here. By the way, make sure you deselect your background node here because otherwise you're going to see those keyframes and you might accidentally fuck them up real quick. But once the camera is finished zooming out, so maybe frame 100, we're going to insert keyframe location rotation scale for the plane. And then when we scale that down, it's also going to scale down the fruits with it because the fruits are parented to the plane. So on frame 130, let's say we're going to do that. We're also going to move it backwards a little bit like this. I think we need only 20 frames for this movement. And now we want to make it look like everything is flying off the ground. So we also want to move the bottle a little bit, which means on frame 125, we're going to lift the bottle up by 1 unit on the z-axis, insert location rotation keyframe, and we want to make the fall off there smooth. So on frame 150, we're going to move it up just a little bit more, so maybe 0.2 meters, insert keyframe location rotation, and now when it jumps up, it's going to continue to move closer for just a little bit. Basically, we want the background to be shrinking at the same time as the bottle's coming up. That way it's going to make it look like the camera is dynamic. It's going to look a little bit nicer. And now at this point, we basically got a clean slate, so it's very easy to create something new. We just have to think of something cool which we can create. Try to think about something you've seen on another commercial which you liked, so next time you drive around the city, just look around on the billboards and the fucking screens. One thing that I want to try to do is to make columns of these little bottles. So I just want to have a screen filled with these bottles to make it look like a very busy highway or something like that. I've seen some advertisements do this. So we're going to duplicate one of these bottles. We're going to lift it up to around here, so it's just on top of this bottle. And by the way, you want to remember the number of units you have to move it by to get it up here. In our case, if we place it right here, that's going to be, let's say 2.2 meters. Let's just make that nice and round. 2.2 meters looks good. And on this second object here, we're going to delete all the keyframes with X delete keyframes, so this one isn't animated. And then you're going to duplicate this again and move it up by 2.2 meters. And then we're also going to duplicate it again and move it over to the side. And once again, make sure you're careful with the number of units you're using. So we're going to use 1.15 here. Again, delete the keyframes, again duplicate it and move it up by 2.2, and just do that a bunch of times until you filled up your screen. So now we can copy this entire row here, and once you've done that a couple of times, now we got 3 rows over here, so we can copy all 9 of these. By the way, if you got a shitty computer, you want to be careful because you remember these bottles are quite high in polygons. So when we duplicate them from the right and we move them to the left, we want to move them by 1.15 or minus 1.15 multiplied by 4, and that's going to give us exactly the right position. Then we want to parent these rows together, so we can just add some empties. For example, we add an empty arrow up here. We're going to point that upwards by rotating it. We're going to scale it up, and we're going to parent all 3 of these bottles to that arrow with Control P. So Control P, object keep transform, and then copy that arrow and do the same thing for all the other rows. Just be careful with the middle row, because in the middle row we don't want to parent the bottle which is already here from the beginning. We're going to keep that separate. We're only going to parent the 2 bottles above it to the arrow. And now you want to take all these arrows and you want to move them out of the way, so get them out of your frame. And first we're going to have the middle row come in and push this initial bottle out of the way. So somewhere around frame 130 in my case, we're going to keyframe the location, maybe location and rotation of this middle row, and we're going to start moving it downwards. So on frame 40 it's going to reach this point here. And by the way, I changed my mind. I want to have a few more of these bottles so I can have them flowing across my screen. So I'll just duplicate 2 or 3 more and I'll move them down by minus 6.6. And on frame 30 I want them to start up here, and I want them to move down, let's say until frame 220, where I'm going to have it fly across the screen like this. Insert keyframe location rotation. By the way, I want to set the interpolation here to linear because I don't want them to start off slowly and then accelerate and decelerate. I just want the movement to be constant, so select everything, insert linear interpolation. That way they're just this moving, and now we just have to get this one out of the way. And once the big column from upstairs gets into contact with the bottle down here, we're going to add another location rotation keyframe, or maybe just location. And on frame 220, which is the last frame of movement for these bottles, we're going to move it down here to the bottom, insert another location keyframe, and set the interpolation between these two keyframes to linear. So now when these come in, they're just going to push this out of the way, and it's just going to move like a train. As that's happening, we want to have these two rows coming in from underneath. So bring them down to the bottom, and then on frame 145 or something, we're going to activate them. So keyframe location here, and up until frame 220, we're going to be moving them upwards. Again, keyframe location. And as you can see now, we got two trains moving in opposite directions. I want something similar going on with these other rows over here, so I'm just going to do the same shit. And now once we got them all in motion, now I'm probably going to spend a little bit more time off camera just playing around with the timings. Maybe I might make everything a little bit slower or a little bit faster. It depends on what I think is going to look best after I'm done rendering the animation. These are just going to be tiny little details which are going to be different for anybody, so it doesn't really make any sense to sit here and talk about all those details in depth. So we're going to finish the animation here, and let me just quickly show you how you can render this. To render it, you go to your output properties, you set the resolution to whatever you like, and then you go down to the output folder. You have to make sure this is set to PNG here, and over here you change your output folder, so just pick a good folder. Make sure you make a new folder inside that folder, because this is going to render out 250 images which you're later going to have to merge together in a program. If you don't want to do that, then just go here and change this to FFmpeg video. In the encoding menu down here, change this to MPEG 4 and change the video codec to H.264. That's going to give you an MP4 file. You don't have to put anything together afterwards. Once you got that, you go up here to render animation. You sit back. It might take a lot of time for this to render, maybe not, depends on what kind of GPU you got. By the way, make sure that you're rendering with your GPU here in the render properties. If you don't got your GPU here, you also might have to go to edit preferences, and then on system you might have to play around with this and figure out what works best for you. Anyway, I hope I gave you guys some good information here today. If I missed something important, let me know in the comments. I can talk about it in another video. Don't forget to check out my courses down below if you want to learn some more advanced techniques. But like the video, subscribe to the channel, let me know what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next one.